In life, good timing seems to go unmarked, unnoticed, and a lot of times it appears to be invisible. Yet bad timing seems to rear its ugly head in glaring and painful fashion. So why do we assume that life is linear? So your portfolio's return is obviously going to be impacted by how the underlying assets perform, as well as how much you save. But it's also dramatically impacted by the timing of the returns. This is something that's wildly overlooked, and it's considerably clear in the second phase of life, being distribution or retirement. This is what we call sequence risk. Now, sequence risk isn't necessarily something you just get to retirement and say, hey, I'm gonna flip a switch, turn my portfolio around, and I'm prepared for it. This is something that you plan for. So we're gonna run through a couple different examples of how big of a difference it can make, and also how the heck you even prepare for this. But before we dive in, my name is Michael McKelvey. I'm a certified financial planner. Hit that subscribe button if you're looking for more content from someone in the industry. Let's jump into it. So sequence risk is the risk around timing, not necessarily the average, but more so the timing. When do those good and bad years occur? And this is incredibly impactful when we look at how much income you get to take in retirement, as well as how much you get to leave behind. Now, there's really three different phases of your financial life. You have really accumulation, you have distribution, and you have legacy, also known as death, what you're leaving behind, right? So sequence risk is important during accumulation. I'll do another video on this. It is important around accumulation. It's really in large part why the experts will say, hey, get more conservative as you age. If you're saving into the account, that is, it's important. If you started with just 10,000 and you shuffled up the order of returns, it wouldn't impact it if you had good returns early on or bad returns early on if you never saved in that account. But most people hopefully are saving during accumulation, and the order of returns will impact it. But where most of the literature is written is around this distribution phase. Because if we have poor returns early on, it can critically impact how much we get to take and enjoy during retirement, as well as how much we get to leave behind. So let's just take a look at an example here. Let's look at an example. So we're going to use some historical data here. We're going to take from 1995 to 2009. And we're going to say start with $2 million in retirement account and you're ready to enjoy yourself. You're taking $150,000 each year. So again, this is S&P 500 data from 1995 to 2009. These were the actual returns, okay? So if we have this normal, we'll say first set or sequence of returns, what actually happened, you would end up with $3.3 roughly million left over. You had a great retirement. You had 150,000, let's say, for 15 years. But you also were left with 3.3 million that you got to leave behind, potentially to a spouse or to your kids or charity, depending on what type of person you are, I guess, right? Now, let's say the second example here, we just flip the order of operations. We flip the sequence of returns. And we start with 2009 being our first year, okay? We're still taking 150,000, so we're doing the exact same thing. Now, does our average change in this example? Well, no. We know that an average, if we just add up the returns, you divide it by the number of years, you're gonna have the same average regardless of when you put those returns in. This is why average is really not a great indicator of how well, let's say, a portfolio is doing or how well a plan is doing, because a lot of times it depends on the sequence or the timing of things. As we'll see here, you're left with nothing left behind. You ran out of money in that final year. So you didn't even have your last check bounce, right? So you got to draw $136,000 roughly in that final year. So we can see just even in this real example, if we flipped the order of operations, you're running out of money. This is a real risk. And this is critically important that we understand, because again, we're not gonna just flip this switch when we get to retirement and say, hey, I'm ready to make my portfolio, let's say, more conservative. This is something we will phase into. So let's talk about that. So what can you do? Well, there's really 4 different reasons I'll touch on. The first here is understanding that you want to get more conservative. And this is a traditional understanding that most people get, and add more bonds, let's say, to your portfolio as you age, okay? Accumulation phase, in a lot of ways, is the least challenging phase from a sequence risk standpoint. There still are risks there. I'll make another video on that because everybody seems to look over that when they talk about this. But the critical difference between distribution and accumulation, you get old. And there's not a lot of 75, 80-year-olds out there that are killing it in their job. So eventually you gotta replace that income because you might not be able to go back to work. So the first thing you can do is just get more conservative as you age and add more portfolio bonds to the mix. Number 2, having flexibility in your safe withdrawal rate. Everybody seems to look over this caveat, okay? So the safe withdrawal rate is essentially the rate that you can take from the portfolio, percentage rate you can take from the portfolio without exhausting it. And it was developed by an engineer, actually. The origins came from an engineer. Of course it came from an engineer. But he took the worst 30-year span and he said, okay, I got a 60-40 portfolio. How much could I take from my portfolio and not exhaust it in the worst 30-year span? That's where the 4% rule came into play because it worked in 100% of the scenarios. Now, that was at a time when bond yields were higher. So a lot of strong arguments to be made that number should be lower. But theoretically, conceptually, this makes sense regardless of what safe withdrawal rate you are using. Because if you get through that first few years of, let's say, retirement, and you don't have a negative string of years or a terrible bear market, let's say, you should be able to increase your spending rate, your withdrawal rate, your enjoyment rate, if you will. Now, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, but statistically, this makes sense. And Michael Kitces actually wrote an article on this. It was a brilliant article that talked about having flexibility and, essentially guardrails on your portfolio as you get there and say, hey, maybe I can enjoy myself a little bit, bump it up from 4 to 5 or 4 to 6 because I got through that critical phase. And there's a number of years. Again, we mentioned 100% of the scenarios worked at 4% from a safe withdrawal standpoint. So that means all of the other scenarios, you got a wide range. I'll put that graphic up now. So theoretically, you could be able to enjoy more if you wanted. Now, I think a lot of advisors don't advise this because it kind of teaches maybe bad behavior of, hey, go spend more money. That's not something we usually do. And it might also mean they're managing less money, which maybe means they're making less money. But it's absolutely worth a conversation. It warrants a conversation. So having flexibility on that safe withdrawal rate. Number 3, spend more conservatively in down market years. Now, this traditionally happens because people aren't going out and really enjoying themselves as much during bear markets. I think 2008, people aren't spending as much money as they normally would. That's part of the reason why the economy went down. But if you have poor years, not taking as much from your portfolio, we saw how much that can drastically impact how much you have, can really help. So maybe curbing some of those variable expenses that you normally would enjoy during those down market years and just sticking a little bit more to the fixed expenses that you have, that can really help. So number 4, give yourself options, also known as diversifying. So when I say diversifying, I don't mean just stocks and bonds. One of the key successful components that I've seen with just about anyone that's been very successful with money is they give themselves options, okay? So not just stocks and bonds, but there's obviously other markets. There's commodities, there's options, there's futures, okay? There's real estate. We know that these operate independently of one another. Now, some of them might go up and down with another, but you might have years where commodities shoot up and US market goes down, or US market shoots up and foreign markets go down. So having different asset classes can obviously help reduce the sequence risk because you're lowering potentially that volatility of your net worth. So these early years are crucial. They're going to determine how much you have as well as how much you get to take ongoing, i.e., how much you get to enjoy in retirement. Now, what I recommend everybody go download the free guide to retirement. I'll put that link in the description. This was in collaboration with JP Morgan. It's a wonderful guide, tons of great data, really just a good starting place. That link will take you to our website. It'll help you download just that free PDF. Super simple, super easy to get it. But this is up-to-date information for 2021. It's a good starting place, really, for planning for retirement, especially if you're 10, 15 years out. So go check that out. And if you have additional questions, I'll also put the link down if you'd like to schedule a 15-minute call just to connect, or if you're curious about, hey, I'd like some help with these pieces. If you find this information helpful, make sure to hit the subscribe button to follow along with us going forward. Hope this helped.